80% plus of planning applications get determined within 13 weeks. Well, that's just nonsense. The point for me is that the private sector can only do certain things, right? We're trying to help the funding side of things, make it easier for everyone to access funding. It's a mystery why, when we have such anemic growth in this country, that the government hasn't thought to invest in house building more than it has. When you look at house building, almost all of the money that it creates stays within the economy. I'm a big believer in compounding interest and compounding returns. Everything that you're doing today has an impact, not only today, but in the future as well.
Summarize what is Brickflow?
So it's a technology platform that connects brokers, borrowers, and lenders. Like every single one of us, it doesn't matter who you are, is affected by this, because every single one of us is paying a mortgage or paying rent, or we're homeless.
Welcome to another episode of the Property Funding Podcast, the podcast for property developers that gives them tips, lessons on how to save time and save money. Delighted today to be joined by Mr. Ian Humphreys, CEO and founder of Brickflow. Ian, delighted to have you today. How are you?
Thanks, David. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you again. How are you keeping?
Yeah, all good, all good. Busy at the moment. Like the market, I think, is at an interesting point. Like everyone's sort of quite cautious, but I think cautiously optimistic, which is a good place. And I think as long as we get a base rate cut or two this year, I think the market will really kick on.
Yeah, good. So you're looking forward to being grilled for the next 50 minutes to an hour?
Can't wait.
On all your knowledge and experience in this space?
Yeah, well, we'll find out, won't we, whether I've actually got any?
Time will tell.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so we first met, would have been about March 2021, would that be correct? At
I'm reliably informed, yeah. So a couple of years ago.
Tyler Newman and Rosie Cassidy.
Yep.
In their Newman Rose.
Was it 2021? Not 2022?
It may have been 2022.
I think
my memory's going. So 2022.
Yeah, I reckon. Yeah, 2 years sounds about right.
2 years. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Because you was just
2021 would have been was the first lockdown, so it can't have been 21.
Kind of in 2021.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
yes.
think 2022.
And you were just obviously Brickflow was very much, and we'll get into that later on in the podcast. But you were just kind of in the formative. We were getting started.
Yeah, very much just beginning. I think we were probably like MVP stage, minimum viable product. For any non-techies, but yeah, we would have been very much early on in our journey. So it's evolved since then.
And what a nice meal Tyler took us for a nice meal the night before.
He did,
I should have explained we were both guest speakers at his training event.
Yes.
And it was a cracking event. He had a really good crowd there. Great location.
They were. And the good, thirsty for knowledge, I think.
Yeah, that's right. There was some interesting discussions. Now, what happened that day, I never ever asked you, was it deliberate or just a sort of a tech glitch? But your laptop wasn't working. So you said to me, would you put my Brickflow,
my slides.
Well, it wasn't the slides. Actually, we went live.
Oh, okay, yeah. I was showing the
your
actual
new software.
The tech. Yeah, okay.
And I thought to myself, is that his ploy just to get me familiar with his software so I buy it?
I think, to be honest, it was more just a case I needed an assistant.
Yeah, it was good.
So it was just I think like it can be quite interruptive of your flow when you're trying to do two things at once, right? So it was probably easier to have somebody else.
So I thought to myself, this guy switched on because what it demonstrated was how easy the software was.
Yeah, exactly. David can use it. Anyone can use it.
100%. You know me too well. You know me too well. Literally, put a password in, and then next thing we're just putting in figures, pressing buttons, and then hey presto. There was a decision in principle from like multiple lenders.
Yeah.
So it was like a live demonstration in front of whatever there was. Was there 120 people in the room that
Probably,
day or something?
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, never ever asked him, was that deliberate? So there you are. We'll leave it that it was. It was smart on your part.
Yeah. I'll claim it.
Yeah. Right. What we normally start with is a bit of a quick fire round. Okay. So this is off the cuff. I can tell by your eyes you're going, I wasn't expecting this. Neither you were. So one word answers. I'm going to just fire some things at you, and you just give me your first answer, one word into your mind. So number one, favorite food.
Curry.
Favorite film.
The Matrix.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. Favorite country?
Italy. I got married in Italy. I really like Italy.
Okay.
Portugal I really like as well.
Okay. Yeah. If your wife sees this, then you have to say Italy. You'd be in trouble if you didn't.
Italy. Yeah.
Favorite sport?
Probably football, but very close second rugby union.
Okay. Obviously, the next question is, which team do you support?
I'm an Arsenal fan.
Oh, very good.
Yeah. I used to have a season ticket there, but then because I used to live in, well, I'd always supported them, but I lived next door to the stadium, so it was super easy. But then I've now moved to South London, and it's not as easy. So you could argue I'm a fair weather fan, I guess. Okay. My friends would say that, I'm sure.
When you say live at the stadium, Highbury or the new one?
The new stadium, the new one? So I lived in Canonbury, which is, it was a 10, 15-minute walk from my house to my seat. Okay. So it was brilliant. Nice. But then I had kids and life and building software and you know it's a big commitment. Yeah. You know, sort of a day out every other weekend, and more is it can be quite a big commitment.
Arteta fan? You like him?
Yeah, definitely. Like he's really coming to his own now. I think they had him up for the job, or he interviewed before they appointed Emery, but he didn't get it. Right. But then obviously Emery didn't work out, and he's come in now, and I think he's brilliant. He's got very good ideas. He's got very clear ideas on how he wants them to play and what the team needs. So I think he's a really good manager, and hopefully he's with us for a long time. And I think we're literally one or two players short of being, the team to
right
be
up there.
Exactly.
And the age is on his side. A lot of the players are young players.
And the age is on his side as well.
Players.
Right? Yeah. No, he's building something great.
I think having the culture of having played for Arsenal, and I would have watched him a bit when he played for Glasgow Rangers.
Yep.
So having that in, that DNA of what being a gunner is, and that maybe helps in a way that some other managers don't have that.
I think, I agree with that, because you're part of the fabric. Definitely the culture of the club. Like Wenger, towards the end, it became a little bit different. But certainly early on, the culture was really ingrained into the club, and I think he obviously saw that. But maybe you'll remember this from Rangers, but I don't remember Arteta being that vocal as a player. No, but you see him on the sidelines as a manager, and he's super animated and very passionate. But I don't really remember seeing that in the stadium as a fan.
I think when he was at Rangers, he was younger, so probably wasn't one of the senior guys in the team. But certainly, he's got a presence about him and an animated style on the touchline. That
I'm
perhaps
sure
he didn't quite.
The hell out of a lot of people.
I can imagine. I'm laughing to myself here. This is becoming a theme of our podcast, that once we start talking football, I'm away on a tangent. Right. We better get back to the quick fire round, which we're on. But I'll be giving the football. So we now round to the more controversial ones now. Okay. Apple or Android?
Apple. So Android. I've never had Apple products.
Oh, now we're talking. Yeah, I'm liking it even more now, because most people are Apple mad. And
no, techie people generally are Apple as well. But always Android.
Oh, man after my own heart. I can't wait to tell John Corey that, who's always berating me for sticking with Android. He's an Apple man. Okay, now this is the big one. This is the big dividing one now. Marmite, like it or hate it?
I don't like it.
It's okay. I think you're in the biggest camp there. You know, there's one or two do. So, okay, dream car?
I don't know, actually. I don't know. I'm not really into my cars that much. Like, I'm sure I'd like to get a nice one day, but not too bothered about cars.
Okay. And then in terms of property, what would be your favorite property type? Villas, houses, apartment, any particular type?
Okay, so we have a house at the moment, which I really like and is great for us at the stage we're at in life. Got 2 young kids, but I certainly think, like, when I'm older, I quite like the lateral living style, like, an apartment in London, secure, something that you can kind of, maybe when I'm retired, maybe move a bit more centrally.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, at the moment, I'm South London, I'm Dulwich, and yeah, it works really well.
Okay.
Nappy Valley.
Nappy Valley. Okay, I like that. And the last one then is, if you could buy a property in any location in the world, or own a property, should I say, own a property anywhere in the world, what location would it be?
Probably in Lisbon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Why there?
Just really like Portugal. We go over quite a bit with the kids, like very family oriented. But Lisbon's really close to the coast.
Okay.
So you've got sort of city living, but then you also, you can be by the beach, and the nice walks and being on the water and stuff like that within minutes, and that really appeals to me. Any city like Valencia and Alicante in Spain as well, like right on the Med, really appeals to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay. So looking about early life then, so where were you born growing up?
So I grew up in Kent, and lived there until I went to university. I went to university, Hull University, so up north. Reasons for that really were I wanted a campus lifestyle, so I wanted to be far enough away from home to not have the temptation to go back. So I wanted to fully immerse myself. And I also really liked, I'd had a couple of others that I'd looked at, sort of Leeds and Nottingham and others, but they were very much more spread out, whereas Hull was all on one campus, and that really appealed to me as well. So I really liked it there, and made some great friends, and then literally moved back from university, and then I've been in London ever since.
Okay.
So started in Chiswick, and then I've been all over Wimbledon, Clapham, Islington, Docklands, Dulwich. So really moved around, but enjoyed everywhere I've been.
Yeah, okay. Any sort of people influence you in any particular way when you're younger, parents, relative?
I think my sort of hero growing up was actually probably my granddad. So he was he was a really intelligent guy, probably ahead of his time. Like he'd probably be referred to now as a futurologist in terms of he thought about what was happening in society and technological advances, and he thought about the application of that. He was a real deep thinker, real reader. Never ever watched television. Right. Like my nan would be downstairs watching television really loudly because she was starting to go deaf. But my granddad would be upstairs in his study, just immersing himself in books. I remember he was very early on got a computer, before anyone else, before it was that common. And he was just, I remember him telling me, and this would have been 35 years ago, telling me that they would grow organs on animals for humans. And that's something that actually doesn't quite happen yet, but is kind of going towards that, right? Yes. And so for someone to sort of predict that 35 years ago, is pretty unusual. So he was definitely a big influence in my life, and someone I always aspired to be.
Yeah. Okay. No, I think it's always interesting when it's a family member. Is that inspirational character? Yeah. Obviously it can be other people as well, but there's something I think nice, particularly about someone of the previous generation, because it really, that's what sometimes culture misses. This passing down of information and knowledge down the generations. Years gone by, there's no other way of doing it. There's word of mouth down the generations.
100%.
And we have lost a bit of that, I think, in the current culture.
Well, we're all too busy, aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a nutshell in many ways. Yeah. Or when we do have spare time, we spend it on information sources elsewhere. Social media and all
scrolling.
That. So, yeah. No, absolutely. I think we're having a problem. We're having the sound problem, are we? Yeah. Is that coming through too much? Was it? Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're hearing it the whole way through, are you? Flip. But it's okay though, just you'll hear it slightly.
It won't be like, obviously I can hear it here, but I mess around with it in the audio.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's just annoying.
Yeah, okay. For you mean either ear? Yeah, okay, that's fine. Yeah, we sort of finished that bit now. We got to that bit. Or no, had we? Yeah. So we're just saying, yeah, we're too busy in this day and age, and and we're any spare time we have, we consume information from elsewhere. Is what you were saying.
100%. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move in now to early life in terms of early business life. So when you obviously went to university, Hull, what did you get into? What was your profession?
I didn't really know what I wanted to do, actually. I just knew that I wanted to work in London, the city. I knew I wanted to work in finance. I studied business management, but I didn't really know. It was one of those courses that was ambiguous enough. It didn't close anything off, but it also wasn't specialist enough to actually have a natural progression.
Right, okay.
So kind of, I'd say, yeah, it's just ambiguous, right? You just, well, I don't know what I want to do yet. That's the kind of degree it strikes me as. So, yeah, for quite a while, I not really dossed around. I've always worked really hard. I've always had multiple jobs when I was going through school and stuff. But I was working in a restaurant, and I was a waiter, and I was doing that for a while. And then I think it got to a point where I'd been doing that for too long, and I decided actually I was going to get a job. And so did some temping. And then as an old friend of mine actually was doing mortgages, and he sort of introduced me to mortgage broking. So it's residential mortgages early on. And then that would have been like 2004. And so leading up to obviously the crash in 07, 08. But it was a really good time. Like the company I worked for was a company called Alexander Hall, who were owned by Foxtons. So they kind of transitioned, I think, while I was there. So I remember, I think it was Simon sold to John, the owner of Foxtons. And then Foxtons got purchased a few years later. But just before the crash, actually. So, yeah, John Hunt called it and did really well. Yeah, so that was a really good grounding. Like the training there was amazing, I would say. Really good, and just really good culture in terms of they made you feel that you were part of something rather than just a cog. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And then in 2008, sort of crash came about. And it became a lot more difficult to earn the money that you had previously because there was just much less volumes. So decided to join a couple of other guys that I'd worked with at Alexander Hall. So basically, the three of us had our own business for a while, and we kind of grew that for a period. I think we got up to, the early days, it was really difficult because there was just nothing. No banks were lending. Credit was extremely hard to come by. And then in about 2014, I think, left that company and decided that I wanted to do something in technology, but wasn't quite sure what. And it was about that time I did some property development myself. And so what I found really challenging was knowing that I had the best deal for my property development. Yet I had 10 years background of working in financial markets, right? In property finance. So I sort of thought to myself, well, if I'm struggling here, how does, Joe Public do it? And the answer is, honestly, is they don't. They generally get ripped off. They certainly don't get best value each time. And so I built some houses and then did some other developments and refurbishments, conversions. And then I think basically I had some money from those projects, and I either could have become a full-time property developer and just rolled my equity into the next deal, or could have built software. And I just felt that the space was crying out for it. There was a definite problem. For me, technology is solving connectivity and efficiency. And that was the problem in this market and in commercial real estate especially. So I'd grown up in residential buy-to-let mortgages where almost everything was automated. So as a broker, you had online portals from like the early 2000s, and the margins like obviously got much finer with the banks as they continue to automate. So they'd automated underwrite risk side, but none of that happened in commercial real estate. And I was always really sort of confused as to why, and it was still being done on handshakes and very old school. And and when we kind of laugh at Brickflow internally, where we say essentially that this is the last industry anywhere in the world to be touched by technology. Like it really is incredible, like how backward, and I don't mean that in a rude way, but there's
just how far they are behind getting. And any ideas why you think that is? I mean, is it just it hasn't happened, or do you think there's been a deliberate
I think
pushing
the lenders,
the change down the line?
I think the lenders have had other priorities. So for most of the lenders, the residential buy-to-let space, the lenders that operate across multiple markets, that's obviously bigger volume. So they've concentrated on automating that. And then inevitably they were going to turn to commercial real estate at some point. But I felt that gap was there now. And the way I look at our technology is we're almost like an outsourced technology partner to lenders because they've not invested in the technology to originate loans. So we've kind of done that for them. And then if you like, we're kind of leasing that capability to them to find loans and bring them to them. So that's really the problem it solves lender side, but borrower side, obviously inevitably, and broker side, it allows you to get to true market value much quicker than it would manually. A search on the software will show you where the market's pricing in 30 seconds. Try and do that manually. It will take you weeks, months.
No, and that's one of the big advantages. And we'll get into sort of the benefit and the uniqueness of what you do. Taking a step back just slightly, so you're seeing the need in the market. You've obviously been in business before for yourself. So have you always had that sort of entrepreneurial drive that you don't want to work for anybody else? Was that something that you'd kind of fixed on? I want to start a business and be the CEO and founder?
No, I mean, titles aren't really important. That's not really what drives me. I think somebody said to me, why did you start Brickflow? And I think my answer, when I kind of really thought about it, was that I knew it would happen. And if I didn't do it, I'd be really upset with myself if I didn't at least give it a shot. So in terms of, I remember, I think I was probably late 20s. I remember being on a date with somebody, and she said to me, what are your aspirations? And just out of nowhere, I said, I want to run a technology platform that's present in multiple countries. And I didn't even think that I thought that. But just off the cuff, I just kind of delivered it. And she was like, oh, wow, that's impressive. And I thought, actually, it is. But where's that come from? And I do think through my 20s, I did have like that aspiration of like building a company. But I think what I didn't know in what direction and where. And I think certainly with all good businesses, it probably starts like, it's not always deliberate, right? I think where I was very fortunate is that I was in an industry which, hadn't developed technology and everybody else had. And you could sort of see, and I remember actually reading a book in, I think, probably 2016. I was on holiday in Sicily, I think, and I read a book called Beyond the Fringes, and I can't remember the author's name. It's a lady, she's a futurologist, and the underlying sort of ethos of the book was essentially that you need to look at fringe technology wherever it is, because the fringe technology is the next mainstream. So she was giving examples of things like, health tech, where the ability to measure vital signs. So that's obviously where like Apple Watches and things like that have come from, right?
The whole industry.
Yeah, but what she was saying is that eventually that will become, everyone will be chipped. Like everyone, this is 2016, right? The book was probably a couple of years old. So this is 12, 13 years ago, somebody with foresight to think, well, eventually every human being is going to be chipped. Yeah. And your vital, it's going to be like, you're going to have an MOT once a year, like a car, but your doctor, your phone is going to be able to tell you when you're having a heart attack, when you should go to the doctors because your cholesterol's too high, if you should change your diet, all of these things, that's going to happen,
it's all
right?
There,
But she was seeing that just from some very fringe technology. Yeah. And so from there, I kind of extrapolated the fact that, in every other industry, every other product, the ability to compare products side by side is commonplace, right?
Yeah.
Amazon, Skyscanner, all these products, you can compare like for like, side by side, and you couldn't do that in commercial real estate. So to me, it was inevitable, but and that's where I got to, where I said, well, this is definitely going to happen at some point, and if it's not me, then it will be somebody else. And if it's somebody else, I'll be really annoyed at myself. Yeah. So that's how I got there.
That makes sense, because it happens so often in business where it's like, it's so obvious. It's like, well, if it's so obvious, why hasn't someone done it? But it still takes someone to go and do it.
Yeah, but also think it's obvious when you're in the industry.
Yes, okay.
And I think that the difference between, perhaps like our industry, commercial real estate, finance versus others, is that it's so nuanced. The lenders don't publish their criteria. So if I'm a technologist, I guess is the correct phrase, but if I'm an entrepreneur with a tech background and I come into a sector, I develop something that can go and scrape data and then I can present it, right? But that didn't exist in our space. So what I thought is that it would take an industry insider to do it, because nobody from the outside could do it, because you needed the relationships with the lenders to get the data.
Yes, which makes a lot of sense in terms of making it happen. So for those, again, just conscious maybe for some of the listeners or viewers, we didn't really maybe explain exactly what Brickflow is. So give like the elevator pitch of Brickflow. We're going to the elevator, we're going up 10 or 11 floors. Summarize what is Brickflow?
So it's a technology platform that connects brokers, borrowers, and lenders in the simplest form. So you have lenders one side, you have brokers, borrowers the other side, and you're able to come in and you're able to compare the market very quickly and easily, and then you're also able to apply to those lenders. So very different to like a money supermarket, where it shows you all the options and then you click through to their website. Because the lenders in our space don't have that online application infrastructure, we do that part for them. So effectively, you create a data room in our platform, and then lenders are invited to come and view it.
Yeah, okay. Yep. Now, we're going to get into your white paper, because I want to dig into that. There's some good stuff. But before we get there, I've mentioned this to numerous people I've spoken to, particularly those that know both of us. Yep. So back in that, you reckon it was 2022 when we met? Yeah. Brickflow and Leo Crowdfunding were probably in a similar kind of, we were probably a bit older than you. In fact, well, we're definitely older, but we're still in that kind of startup mode. Yep. You were doing a funding round, we were doing a funding round. Yeah. And then you fast forward to 2024. Unfortunately, Leo Crowdfunding kind of went to cease trading, and Brickflow was obviously went very, very well. And I've said that to a few people, like we both had a meal with Tyler in a very similar stage of our business. So how have you found that journey of starting but then scaling? Because that was a bit that always would, if there's anything kept me up at night, like wondering about the business and what needs to change, it was like scale. How do you know when to hire the staff? How do you get the right staff? How do you know when to really go for that big funding round to explode the company? So what's that journey been like for you?
Firstly, obviously, commiserations on Leo. Like there's a great business there for sure. Like, and I'm sure, like at some point, like there will be a phoenix from the flames.
There could well be.
Yeah. Yes. So, but in terms of scaling, I think a lot of it is just gut instinct, right? Like, we've had times where we've kind of wanted to push forward, but we can't. Like, our funding, our cash flows restricted us. And then we've had other times where, perhaps we had the money to do it, but we've decided actually the market conditions weren't right.
Okay.
So I do think, and again, that's possibly where industry experience helps with this. I think the wider macro environment has been challenging. So, if we'd set up Brickflow 5 years ago, the mantra when interest rates were really low, it was very easy to get investment, right? Because everyone was chasing return. So they were getting nothing in the bank. So what was happening is technology businesses were, taking funding round, they were showing some progress, still operating at massive losses, but then they were still able to secure more funding at a higher valuation.
Yes.
And that was the story, invest, higher valuation, invest, higher valuation, but always making a loss. So you were going ahead of your revenue. Revenue was never catching up.
Yes.
So what we've tried to do is get to a point of break even and now, because we can't rely on external funding sources to boost our growth. So, excuse me, we've done 2 funding rounds, but the last one was in 2022, in the summer of 2022.
Yeah.
And then since then, we've kind of got our way to sustainability. So, we've been very lucky with some of the hires we've made. Our head of sales who's come in has been fantastic. We've got really good software partners. So the guys that build the software, a lot of tech businesses, I think, make the mistake of trying to be a bit too frugal with their tech. They try and outsource it overseas and things like that. Right. Our tech's always been based in the UK. So we're on the same time zone. There's no language barriers. And also they're the second largest shareholder in our business. So, we are strategically aligned in terms of delivering a product, right? So I think there's a lot of things that you need to sort of think about early on that then ensure that you benefit from them later on. I think of the hours that I used to put in earlier on in the journey, I don't have to put in the work that I used to day to day, but we're going faster. And that's because of the time that was invested previously.
Yeah, it's like the snowball up the hill analogy. It's any new business starting off or CEO founder, the time is needed and the effort initially, but there comes a point where there's momentum and you don't have to push as hard, is I think what you're alluding to. Yeah,
exactly. I'm a big believer in compounding interest and compounding returns. Yeah. And, I always think everything that I'm doing, and I always try and instill this within everybody within the business, is that everything that you're doing, today, has an impact not only today, but in the future as well. So by doing it correctly and creating a process around it means we go faster in the future.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So, we've tried to really instill that within the culture of the company.
The team. And how many staff have you got now?
So we're about 20.
Wow.
That includes our technology, they are a separate company. Excuse me. So they're not employed by us, but we have, I think, 12, 13 full-time employees, and then we have a few consultants and our technology.
That's becoming a decent sized SME which then brings some of its own challenges possibly in terms of running that. Are you still kind of the overseeing day to day? I know you're the CEO, but if you got a COO in place that kind of runs the business for you, or
no. So at the moment, our sort of C-suite, if you like, is myself, our head of sales, Fraser, and then Robert, our CTO. That's our kind of top level, and then we've got some people that sit just under that head up their individual departments. We're very lean. There's no there's no luxuries. We're very we count every penny, and the reason being is that we could go to market and raise money. I think now we've probably demonstrated the product. There is a need in the market, and actually the figures that we're producing, month on month would suggest that we would get a different kind of investor now. But each time you invest, you dilute, right? And, I think it's not just, so I remember that there's a term that people refer to, dumb money, which is just, people investing but adding no value. And I think what the stage we're at now is that, we can continue just without raising any funding. We can continue to bootstrap and get to, profitability and beyond. Or we could raise, but if we're going to raise, it needs to be somebody that actually can add value, because somebody that can't is just putting money in and will see the upside without actually doing anything. It's just their money.
It is.
And the thing is, if I take money today, I can't spend it.
Yes,
so there's a natural progression and elevation in our trajectory and growth curve at the moment that we're going to realize either way. And so if somebody's money comes in and just sits there in the bank account and they get that upside, that to me isn't fair. Not just for me, but for my existing investors.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's an interesting way of thinking of it. You don't often hear business owners articulating that in that way. Some people are just, well, I need the money. How do I get the money? But be able to just take a step back and say, well, actually, is this smart money or dumb money? And what is the value? And if you can bring on strategic partners and alliances, and that's one of the, sometimes people have this thing, do you regret anything? I don't regret anything. Like, I do have regrets over later crowdfunding. I regret some of the decisions I made. I regret, some things that happened. That's life. I'll try and learn from them. But one of the big regrets is there could have been such a great relationship between Leo crowdfunding and Brickflow. We obviously had conversations in the early days. We're talking about obviously sharing the technology for the analysis of deals, which would have been brilliant for us. Circumstances just dictated we never really got there. And looking at where you are now on the debt side and the funding side, having an equity partner, FCA regulated, even just as an affiliate relationship, like that would have offered the market, I think, an incredible solution for funding.
I agree.
I imagine you agree.
Yeah, absolutely. It would have been a natural progression for us and like a very, complementary partnership for sure. Yeah.
But the joys on that. But what I do want to get on to is your white paper, and I've actually printed out a copy.
Well done.
And
that looks a bit thin.
Reading through it. Well, your first couple, not everything, the whole thing, but
it's a 60-pager.
Yeah, it's a big one. We're saving a few trees.
Yeah, okay, cool.
I didn't want to print them all out, but I remember when it came out, going like, wow, because we were literally in this mode of pivoting. Obviously, Leo crowdfunding was going to cease trading, and we were planning PropFundrs. And I suppose in full disclosure, we do use your technology for PropFundrs. If you go on, when people go on our website and they have a look at how they can go through our process, they then can use your software to have a look at the market for lenders. So that we do have that now, thankfully, in our PropFundrs. So I remember at the time, it was brilliant because I was trying to put together the business case for PropFundrs, and while before we were just equity, now there was this whole big world of lending and debt and all the rest of it, which wasn't my area of expertise. Equity, yes, I knew about the debt, but I thought your white paper was fantastic because it was like where you could go to get a holistic approach to what's happening in the market, but then have those tough conversations about what needs to change, what needs to happen, and the fact that you had such I think an in-depth analysis, was really good and a credit to you. And
Thanks,
I did actually laugh, and I've just written it down to remind me. I think it was on Sky TV. They referred to your white paper as scathing of the government policy. And I thought, okay, there's no mention words there. So is that the reaction you got in some circles, maybe from government, that the thought?
It was surprisingly, we wrote to government and presented it to them, and surprisingly, we didn't get any real response. We got a thanks, we'll look at it and we'll get back to you. I think, for us, like the problem that we've tried to solve on the funding side is, really when you look at house building, okay, there's very few things I think that are full circular wins for the economy. So house building, almost all of the money that it creates stays within the economy. So like any money that technology platforms make in the UK, Amazon, Apple, etc., almost none of it stays in the UK. So there's very little societal benefit of those companies to the UK. Whereas building houses, Yeah, that employs people on the ground in the UK. Like most of the investment, the money that's coming into it is UK. So that money stays in the UK. So it creates jobs, it creates revenue, creates tax revenues for government. So, and also society benefits because property prices are coming down, or better quality, or property prices aren't as elevated as they are and unaffordable as they are. But it also means that people get better quality product for that price.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, it's a mystery why, when we have such anemic growth in this country, post-Brexit especially, that the government hasn't thought to invest in house building more than it has.
Yeah.
And we have these very sort of like light touch, sticking plaster approaches that come out at every budget of, first time buyers.
Sound bites.
Yeah, exactly. First time buyer incentives. And it keeps saying, I remember under Boris, it was like, build was the mantra. We need 300,000 homes a year.
Yeah.
Well, we haven't even got close to that. The most we've done recently, I think it's in the white paper, was 224,000 in a year. And then obviously COVID hit, slightly skewed. But the point being is 300,000 was seen as quite a conservative number of what we needed each year. And we're not getting close to it. But the point for me is that the private sector can only do certain things, right? We're trying to help the funding side of things, make it easier for everyone, democratizing funding, make it easier for everyone to access funding, the right funding, maximizing their return on capital, maximizing their equity. Like that's what our platform is trying to do. But the thing that's holding it all up at the moment is planning. And planning is absolutely critical, but the private sector can do nothing. It's up to government to sort planning. And so the idea of the white paper was really to try and alert the government or whoever's in government, as to the problems that, people who are actually in the industry at the coalface.
At the coalface,
what they see day to day and their views on it. And so we had people like PwC, we had people like Knight Frank, all contribute to it. We had some regional house builders, and they all gave their view on where the market was broken. And a lot of it kept coming back to planning. I mean, there's many different reasons, but planning is fundamental. And it's interesting. I mean, this is just anecdotally something I picked up the other day, where if you look at the statistics on planning, the government maintains that every plan, or 80% plus of planning applications get determined within 13 weeks. Well, that's just nonsense. Everyone I speak to is not getting that. But what they're saying is that from the point of acknowledgement, of validation of your application, it is 13 weeks, 80% plus. But the validation period is 6-9 months.
Yeah, exactly.
Last time I did a planning application, it got validated within 2 days.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's the thing. Like, they're manipulating the data and the figures to fit their narrative. Yeah. And the point is that, all of these councils, they're under-resourced, they're all facing huge budget cuts. But actually, investment from central government into planning would propel the economy forward. And the government would not be in the position they're in terms of getting, annihilated potentially at the next election if the economy was doing well, because everyone would feel better.
Exactly. That's such a big
five years or more ago, because they've been in power 14 years, they could have easily solved that problem.
No, I think you're right, and I can tell your passion for that.
Yeah, no,
clearly,
really, I get
it's
really
frustrating.
irritated.
Yeah, I can understand that. And
I
mean, we had it as our crowdfunding platform. We had planning projects people invested in that you looked at it and went, well, even allowing for an elongated planning, like it's bound to be through at this point.
And it was still
and we're still
year.
waiting for it. And you're going, well, how is that? And on our PropFundrs monthly webinar, the episode before last, we brought on a couple of planning professionals, and we had a really good discussion. And it was fascinating, just even from those who are actually in the industry, professionals in planning, about how do you go about solving this. But unless there's the will to solve it, all the conversations are a waste of time.
Well, I think, as you highlighted in the white paper, I mean, the number of housing ministers.
15 housing ministers in 13 years. Is that the stat?
I think we're up to 17 now. But the point is that just shows you the level of respect that the role is given within government.
Within government, that's a really good point.
Yeah. And I think it needs to be taken out of government hands. This should be something that sits separate to government, because it is so important that every single one of us, it doesn't matter who you are, is affected by this, because every single one of us is paying a mortgage or paying rent, or we're homeless.
Right?
That's
right.
And
one
so
of those
every single person in the country is affected by the lack of housing in this country. And the only people who can solve it are government. And as you can see from the housing minister revolving door situation, they really don't care.
It's a stepping stone to a better job, type thing. So you've kind of led in nicely there. So you're and it's called the Solving the UK's Housing Shortage. You can get it on your LinkedIn profile. You can scroll down and get it all there. No doubt it's on your Brickflow website as well. So you've got the 3 areas that you identified as needing fixed or needing addressed. The planning, land supply, and of course funding. Obviously the funding leads us on very nicely to the property funding podcast. But you've kind of covered planning there. Land supply, so speak to that. What did you mean by this is a factor must be addressed?
Yeah, so land supply, I mean, we're very constricted in the UK. Obviously, we're a small island. The available land supply is tiny. I can't remember the exact stat. I haven't looked at it for a while, but I think it's 0.2% of land is currently available to build on.
Yes.
Which is tiny. But where you need to sort of have like I think and I think technology can help solve this, is you need to look at where the needs are, right? So the developing infrastructure that supports housing is expensive, so for me, rather than going to like a greenfield site that isn't connected to utilities and isn't connected to sewerage, etc., like that's quite a big piece of work. Whereas actually repurposing our city centres, which currently, a lot of them vacant units, etc., which the government, to their credit, they have tried to revamp permitted development rights to tap into that. But I think repurposing land more quickly is really key to it. But also in the white paper we picked up that they need to audit the Greenbelt. So we've got London, we've got this area of land that kind of sits around it, which is sacrosanct. We can't build on it. Whereas actually, when you speak to people on the ground and you look at some of the land, and I think Labour have coined the term grey belt, and what they mean by that is, some Greenbelt land is a car park next to a train station. It's disused wasteland.
It's not.
It's not what we quintessentially think of Greenbelt as Brits, and we think of rolling meadows,
a nice wood,
somewhere where you want to have a picnic.
Through.
And lots of it isn't that, right?
So that's a good point.
Reclassifying it would free up a lot of land. But it's close to infrastructure, right? Because there's towns and cities that are already
you've
there.
Got infrastructure there.
So you've got infrastructure that you can tap into, rather than jumping over the Greenbelt and building in new areas where there isn't the infrastructure there.
Having the extra. Right? Okay.
So
what about building up? So in terms of, like particularly where we are here now, you've got buildings 6, 7, 8 stories, but dotted throughout, an area with very few. I mean, should there be more of a focus on building up in conurbation areas, or not?
Again, I think yes is the answer. And again, like the government has tried to address this with permitted development. I think you can build 2 stories up now without permission. You can go to the same height as other buildings. So I think more awareness around that point. I think. Not all buildings are structurally could allow that increased density.
That's a good point.
So I think certainly I know from speaking to developers in the past, they get excited about an air rights deal, and then they engage a structural engineer, and actually it turns out that it's not suitable.
The cost is prohibitive.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not always a solution, but absolutely where it's possible, because again, you're connected to the infrastructure already, right? You're increasing density, massing, rather than building new stuff where infrastructure doesn't exist.
On all that, okay.
Yeah.
So the third point then, so obviously planning land supply is obviously funding, which obviously is close to your heart in terms of Brickflow.
Yeah.
So what if I was to say, Ian, what needs fixed with funding to the property developers? How would you answer that?
I think there's two things really. So I think for developers, I certainly think educating themselves as to how funding works. Like if I mean, over the years, I've spoken to hundreds, if not thousands, of property developers, and the ones that are most successful are the ones that understand finance the best. And that's without like exception. You can be the best person at identifying a piece of land and seeing the potential of it. You can be the best builder. You could be the best planning expert. But unless you understand how funding works, then you will always be doing it with one arm behind your back.
Yeah.
Like I know some pretty average developers that understand funding better than most, and they're much further ahead because they understand it.
I think in the training you did that day in Leamington Spa with the Newman Rose Group, I think you made a comment along the lines of property developers think they're in property development, but actually they're not. So what was that?
So the property developers make the mistake of thinking they're in the property development game. They're actually in the property finance game.
That's the one.
So, and to illustrate this point, I'll give you a couple of examples. So, our software, we're now, I think we have about 60, 70 websites that run our software now. And for me, again, coming back to the most successful developers I know, they tend to come from a finance background. So they're either ex-city guys, analysts, management consultants, accountants, people that are used to working with numbers and dealing with risk. And I think the way that they will approach a scheme is most of them will not even get out of their chair to go and see a site until they've understood how it works financially. And so this is what our software does, is you can run it through the software. It takes 30 seconds and it will tell you whether that deal stacks. If it stacks, spend the time on it, right? Go and spend the 20, 30 hours you need on your due diligence, speaking to local agents, speaking to builders, all of that stuff to then understand that next stage. But if it doesn't stack, bin it. Like
that's a really good point.
If you've got 10 deals on your desk, I guarantee you 8 or 9 of them will not work.
Just will not work, And
either on your equity, like your equity reserves, or just will not work entirely. And another example I can think of is, and just of exactly that, is speaking to a developer recently. He had a deal that he'd asked me to. I met him socially, and he asked me to look at it. And I just ran it through the software on my phone, and I just said, look, here's your funding costs. And he'd underestimated them by £1 million. His funding costs by £1 million.
He underestimated his funding costs in the project by £1 million.
By £1 million.
Wow.
And
that's a bit of an effect on profits, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. and this is the point. He's immediately on the back foot. He's got investors on that scheme. They haven't put a spade in the ground. He's now having to go back to them and tell them that half the profit, they're 50-50 on it. They've lost £500,000 through nothing, just because he didn't understand what he would be paying for his finance. So, that's a really hard conversation to have. And it certainly, as an investor, you think, well, if this guy doesn't understand the cost of funding, what level, else has he underestimated,
that's exactly it.
Build costs, finishing costs, etc. So a lot of confidence, credibility will go from that relationship from a simple thing of not understanding finance. But the long and the short of it is he's overpaid for that land, right? He's paid a price for that land based on his model, which assumes finance costs at the wrong level. So if he hadn't paid the land, he'd now certainly not be paying the price that he paid. So now he's going to chase his tail all the way through, deliver less, an inferior product, because he's having to recoup what he's overpaid on the land through the build costs.
Yeah, and what you're emphasising is if developers at the start really understand the finance, understand all those numbers, have it like right to the level of detail they need with all their adjustments for extra spend and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Then it would rule out so many deals that end up getting done. But really never should have been done.
It's not so much getting done; it's getting done at the right price.
Well, the right price, yes, okay, yes.
And this is the thing and I know land is scarce, so there is always this propensity for it to be bid up, especially by an unrealistic seller. But if you can show the seller, look, this is why I can't pay you this price, because these are my numbers. Then you start having a conversation with them. You open them up, right? They might come around to your way of thinking, or certainly not hold out for the higher price. But I think the key point to make is that it's not just the debt piece; it's the equity piece, right?
As well,
So equity, for me, there's two costs, right? There's the financial cost of it, but there's also the cost of not having that money in your pocket, right? So the cost of not being able to deploy that equity elsewhere. So what we talk about internally is the inefficient equity deployment. So what the software is designed to do is show you the optimum point, the optimum return on capital employed. So if you speak to one lender and they want £500,000 to be put into the deal, there's probably another lender out there that only wants 300,000 or 250,000. So if they only want 250, you could run two schemes at the same time with the same amount of money.
Equity,
and the profitability there, you're going to pay slightly more for your finance, but the profit is going to massively outweigh the additional cost of funding, right? So that's the ways to think. And I think certainly with the planning delays that you have, historically, taking a site through planning and delivering it was maybe 3 years. Whereas now it's probably 4 or 5 years. So if you're a developer that has a 20, 25 year career, you can do it. You used to be able to maybe deliver 7 or 8 schemes in that time if you went one by one. Now you might deliver 4 or 5. So you've actually got to increase your returns much more on each site, unless you can run multiple at the same time.
That's a very good point.
And I think, again, with the equity point, so I said there was 2 things, I think. Like, one is borrowers educating themselves better. The second point, I think, is around the government. I think, they could deploy the resources they deploy better by supporting SMEs. So by creating an equity bank, effectively. So to give you an idea of the scale of the problem, the interest rates, when they go up, for every million of borrowing, you pay an extra 10,000 as a borrower per year. So the average property development loan in the UK is 5 million. So every developer now is paying £50,000 more on an average loan for 1 year than they would have done pre the current rate rises, or the recent rate rises. So let's say the average loan is 2 years, it's actually 100,000. Now that money comes directly off the day one loan, right? Because the lender now is allocating more to the interest retention than they were previously. So you've now got to find an extra 100k of equity.
On the front
if
end.
you take that across a 9 billion annual market, that's 450 million of extra equity that developers need to find that they didn't need to find 2 years ago. If the government took 450 million, which is pittance for the government, and put it into a fund that allowed people to operate and build the same level of housing
and access that funding
for an equity stake within that deal, that would allow the market to move without interest rates impacting.
See, that sort of leads on to an interesting thing that you, again, put in your white paper. I think it was along the lines of developers will only build houses if they are confident they can sell them. So it's like, this isn't just a one action solves the problem. You've all these multiple. So you've just referred to the fact that it's already even having funding, but if the cost of funding goes up, then it then becomes inhibitive because there's not enough equity in the market, or you need more equity. So you've a good solution there of creating like an equity pot almost that then can be accessed. That's like another hurdle that the developers are over.
Overcome, yeah, exactly.
But then there's other hurdles then still in the pipeline.
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing with rate increases. Obviously, is that the affordability of your end buyer becomes or reduces. And you're absolutely right. Yeah, developers are only going to build if they feel they can sell. So then they land bank, especially the bigger ones, right?
Yeah.
They sit on land. They've got 7-10 year pipeline of land.
Yeah.
But until it gets to the right price, they're not going to build.
So if you have a shortage of houses, and it's like the land sitting there ready to build, but it doesn't suit the developers to build. So therefore, we're not actually solving the problem. We're not addressing the problem.
Exactly. So, the government needs to incentivize people to bring stuff to market, even when they aren't going to achieve the profit margins they want to, right?
Yeah,
because, either you nationalize it, and I mean, if you look at other countries, social housing makes a much bigger proportion of the mix of total housing than it does in the UK. So either you take more in-house as government, or you incentivize people to deliver stock even when the market conditions aren't that favourable. Tax incentives, seems to be an obvious one.
Yeah, there's ways you can enable it, again, if there's the will, which is interesting. So, what you're talking about there, I remember reading your blog on the development finance paradox, I think is what you called it.
Yeah.
Looking at that, the difference of percentages of debt versus equity, and some of the examples you have are very interesting.
Yeah.
In terms of the perception of, if I can borrow this amount of money at this price, surely it's better because it's cheaper. And you're showing that actually no, if you can deploy equity across multiple projects, that actually, your profit margins will be greater in the end game.
I think that, there's the development finance paradox is essentially, when you look at any other financial product, cheapest is normally best for the consumer. Not always. Insurance, obviously, there's different connotations of going cheap, but certainly with your mortgage, you generally want the cheapest mortgage, right? So people have it in their heads that they want the cheapest development finance, but the cheapest development finance is also the lender taking least risk, and least risk means more equity from you.
Correct.
And I think the way to think about it is, if you went to an asset manager, investment manager, you had £1 million, and you said to them, "I've got £1 million I want to invest," and they said, "Right, stick it all in this stock." You'd think they're crazy, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You wouldn't engage with them because, surely I need to spread my risk.
Yeah, diversification.
But no one applies that to development, right? So if you've got all your money in one development, property development, and it goes wrong, you're wiped out.
Trouble.
Whereas if you spread it across multiple developments, not only are you increasing your return on capital employed because the profitability will be better, but you also diversifying your risk in that if one of them goes under, you've still got your skin in the game elsewhere.
And we sometimes forget, Ian, and obviously you're at the cold face, you probably know developers who have lost lots of money on deals. And I know people, I was actually talking to someone the other day who I know was in a business and unfortunately lost around about 20 million of investor money.
Right, yeah.
I mean, we sometimes forget behind the statistics are real people.
Yes.
Who, either made mistakes or circumstances aligned, in terms of what's happening at government level, industry level, interest rates, inflation, all these things conspire, and real people can find themselves in difficult positions in this industry of trying to fund deals. It can be harsh, it can be unforgiving at times.
Very much so. I think that was part of the inspiration behind developing the software. Really, was that for me, property developers are taking so much risk. They're risking bankruptcy pretty much every time they take on a project, right? They're giving personal guarantees on the loans, and there's so many things outside their control. So as you highlighted there, macro events completely outside their control, interest rates, cyclication of economies, demand, supply of property, that all comes into the mix. And I think the big thing I'm seeing at the moment with planning delays is, people are a victim of that. And I'll give an example of that, where if you buy a piece of land today, and let's say you pay £1 million, and you've done that on the basis that is going to take 6 months or 9 months to get planning, if that doesn't get planning for 2 years, you're building in a very different environment to what you've actually traded the property in the first place.
Yeah.
So is that property worth $1 million? Now, if you're lucky, it might be worth more, right? Because prices have gone up in GDV. But as we saw during sort of the recent past, actually build costs have gone up hugely.
Correct.
So anyone that bought land 2 years ago now will probably be underwater because the GDVs have gone up slowly or stabilised.
Yeah.
But actually the build costs have eaten up a much greater...
And cost of finance. So build cost of finance, two major pressures on
which means your residual land value has dropped. So... part of as I say, part of the inspiration behind building software was the fact that, developers are taking so much risk and they deserve better than what the market was giving them, which is like zero technology, zero ability to compare lenders side by side, and scratching around trying to find the right funding partner, and, some pretty aggressive, unborrower-friendly documentation from lenders, and it existed because there was no transparency, right? So if you bring transparency to it, then everyone gets a little bit better. Funding hopefully becomes more competitive, and everyone benefits. So that was a lot of the inspiration.
And, you alluded to something there, which again is very interesting. That if you talk to the average punter, they wouldn't believe you, but it's absolutely true. There are, thankfully, not that many, but there are some lenders out there that the legal paperwork and documentation around the loan is almost designed to let them step in whenever they want, take over the asset and dispose of it. They've almost got a business around getting developers to sign up to unfavorable terms. I think step in. Is that fair, or am I exaggerating that?
I think there's no, absolutely not. There are definitely. I mean, certainly. There are private lenders around that probably do that. I mean, we're very careful on the platform. Onboarding lenders there's quite a sort of rigorous process in terms of us understanding how they're funded, what kind of projects, how they behave. Like that's all part of the process. But absolutely, there are lenders in the market that exist purely because information is incomplete. The lack of transparency plays to their advantage, so they can charge extortionate rates. They can have very restrictive covenants, aggressive covenants that are, as you say, deliberately there to trip up the borrower. So, certainly, again, technology kind of stops that happening at perhaps the level it was historically, because, again, post-COVID, when none of the banks wanted to lend in the space, there was an absolute proliferation of people that were profiteering from.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, look, times beating us here. There's so much more I could comment on in this white paper. I mean, some of the percentages are eye-watering, in terms of the percentages of some of the the surveys and stuff were done. And I think the big one, 92% unhappy with the government's approach on housing. Not a big surprise there, I'm sure, on that, But again,
probably undercooked that, isn't it? 92.
It could probably be more. Yeah. Again, what I like this one, which is pretty honest. There's no silver bullet to address the housing crisis. There isn't. Do this and we're solved. It's going to take the will, but it's also going to take time to fix multiple aspects. But none of them are unsolvable. None of them are unfixable. It just takes the will to fix them.
And that's why I think it should be an external body that looks after it, because Parliament's is a 5-year cycle. Some of these decisions perhaps aren't all going to be always that popular, or you're not going to see the benefit that quickly.
Yes.
So actually,
it doesn't get
you're not
votes.
going to prioritise it.
Doesn't get votes, therefore it's not on their priority list on that. Okay, well, sort of wrapping up here, where does Ian see Brickflow in 5-10 years' time? What's the plan?
I mean, who knows? I mean, we're fortunate now in that we've got about 200 companies now using the software, and the feedback on it has been great around. And these are debt advisors, brokers, and the idea is really just to keep improving the technology. So where we can add value. Different products, different markets, we'll absolutely do that, and look to, hopefully benefit people that are in those industries.
Okay. So if there was any don't do this sort of takeaways. So someone as a developer, well, we do it as a developer or even just someone, entrepreneur starting their business. And from your experience and your journey, is there anything you would say, you know what, don't do this?
I think for a property developer, I think, if you're starting, take advice from people that have done it. I think a decent broker is really going to open your eyes as to what's possible. If you've got developers, especially that have been through a full economic cycle, that would be really invaluable to speak to, because, we speak to people, recently who've only ever known good times. They're young enough that they were post last crash, and they've only, and now the market's very sticky. It's kind of like, I don't know how to operate. So I think certainly, getting people around you, mentors, I guess is the phrase I'm looking for, word I'm looking for. But in the business, I think really any entrepreneur, I would say, really understand like the market that you're operating in. It's very easy to have an idea and think like this is something that needs to be done. Then absolutely, it probably does need to be done if you've recognised that. But are you the right person? Do you have the expertise? Do you have the industry knowledge to execute it? I think that's probably key. And I'm not saying I do. I mean, Brickflow might not be here in a year or whatever, but it certainly, it's not as easy as just going, I've got a great idea. It's all about the execution. Yeah,
that's a good point. All about execution is a good takeaway. So I'm getting my crystal ball out. I have 2 questions around my crystal ball. So number 1, will interest rates come back down to like anywhere near what they were before the rise?
No, I don't think they'll ever go that low again. And other than like a force majeure event, but I think they'll come to sort of maybe 4. I think they'll drop this year towards sort of Q3, Q4. I think the market's currently pricing in 2 drops. So if we got to 4.75 by the end of the year, I think that would be a good.
That'd be a good one.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah.
And the second one, which is the big one, will Arsenal win the league under Arteta in the next 2 or 3 years?
Oh yeah, I think they will. Yeah, I don't think they will this year, but I think City have probably got a bit too much because it's in their hands. I was looking actually yesterday, day before, and all of City's games are winnable. All of Arsenal's, they've got Tottenham at the weekend. They've still got to go to Man U. So we could drop points. We've got really good goal difference, but ultimately, if City don't drop points, it's out of our hands.
And they have that winning habit, that winning experience.
But I think Arteta will definitely win the league with Arsenal.
No, it'll be good to see it from a football point of view for sure. On that front. So, listen, absolute pleasure. I hope you enjoyed that exchange and sort of deep dive into things. And again, it's brilliant, genuinely seeing where you were back in 2022 and just seeing the growth of Brickflow. It's been impressive. Wish you every success with that in the future. Thank you. No doubt our paths will keep crossing. So listen, thank you for coming on.
Thanks, mate.
Appreciate that. All right. Talk to you soon.
Cheers, David.